Welcome to Imposter Hour with Liz and Greg. We're here to explore the imposter syndrome that haunts creatives, delving into how it affects their lives and work. Join us as we chat with authors and artists about creativity, self-doubt, featuring imposter characters in their stories, and the occasional imposter who pops up in their day-to-day lives.
Today we have the pleasure of welcoming Asia Mackay to the podcast. Asia is the author of 2 novels published in the UK. After a career in television in China, she returned to London, where she worked for Ewan McGregor and Charlie Boorman on their round-the-world motorbike documentaries. She started writing her debut novel, Killing It, on maternity leave. It was the runner-up in Richard and Judy's Search for a Bestseller competition and runner-up and exceptionally recognized for the Comedy Women in Print Prize. Her latest novel, A Serial Killer's Guide to Marriage, is on sale in the U.S. on January 14th, 25, and as of the airing of this episode, that's tomorrow. So get out there and grab your copy. Asia lives in London with her husband, 4 young children, and 2 dogs. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us.
Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I just also want to mention, I think it's a simultaneous release in the UK as well. So this is
That's
a
right.
big
Yeah,
pub day for you worldwide.
it is. It's been a busy week.
I bet. Well, your bio alone, Asia, just brings up so many questions in me. And the first one I'm just going to launch into is, well, just the statement that you started writing your debut novel on maternity leave.
I know. It does sound slightly insane. I don't. It's funny actually because a lot of people. There's that famous quote about how the pram in the hallway is like the kind of death knell for creativity, and how much being a parent can slightly ruin that creative space you need to get into. And I'm probably one of the only people that actually was the reverse for, because I didn't start writing until I was on maternity leave with my 3rd child. I mean, I'd always loved writing at school, never really pursued it, just thought, big deal. I like writing stories. I like reading. Doesn't mean I could do anything with it. It was just that pipe dream I never even had the confidence to ever try. And I guess it was because I was so sleep deprived and deranged on it. I came up with this slightly crazy idea when I was crawling out the kids' room one night, which was, oh, I wish I was a spy. I wish I had super skills and maybe I could get out of here without waking the baby. And it just sparked the idea of this assassin mum, rushing home, out killing bad guys, rushing home for bath time. And that basically that ended up being my first book. And so, it was, and I signed my first publishing deal the day before my 4th child was born. So it was a pretty crazy time.
I mean, it just, it's you had said something at the beginning of that beautiful answer about how kids and becoming a parent is like the death knell for creativity, which lends itself beautifully to your current novel, A Serial Killer's Guide to Marriage, and the main character. And I definitely want to touch on that. But, I'm also just kind of imagining the image of you said crawling out of your child's room, and I know exactly what that is. As the mother of a toddler, you probably got them down and then you had to like literally hit the ground to escape. And I just appreciate so much the acknowledgement that, I think like so many of these adult milestones in life as creatives, they can signify these like radical changes to our routines, to our like mental, makeup, to our hormones. And there's a lot of hope in what you're saying, that you can still, get creativity out of those life-changing moments.
No, definitely. I think it's, if it's something you want to do, I think don't let it stop you, even in your kind of exhausted, slightly crazier moments. An idea might spark, and it's like I always say, if you don't try something, and I suppose until I sat down and started trying to write, I just didn't think I could. And it just took the idea of me coming up with that idea to go, right, now is it. I might as well. I'm on maternity leave. Let's give it a go and see what I've got. And I didn't have any plot or anything. I just had an idea of like kind of anecdotes or little scenes, little stories. And eventually I kind of weaved them all together and came up with a kind of narrative that worked as a whole book. And that was my starting point though. Just writing a page in the voice of this character. And that was it.
Okay. I wanted to ask you, kind of follow up on the same theme. So your protagonist, Hazel Matthews, in the story, in the book rather, in A Serial Killer's Guide to Marriage, is a fine artist. And a contributing factor to her discontentment in the story is that she feels like her artistic process has been taken away from her in a way and cut off. And I was wondering, I mean, is that something that you have had experiences with over the course of your writing career with being a mother and having all these other responsibilities, or have you been able to maintain something of a regular kind of sanity saving practice yourself?
I mean, it's just, I think it's knowing which days are not going to work for you and leaning into it and just giving up, because I think there's nothing worse. The days I found the most stressful are when I'm feeling like I need to write, but I also have to parent because for whatever reason I've got all the kids, and trying to do both is when it all falls apart. You're yelling at them, you're writing rubbish. It doesn't work. I think you just have to have the strength to go, okay, it's not going to happen today and I'll work twice as hard tomorrow. And that's it. I think otherwise that's where your sanity starts to crack. It's when you are just, miserable at both at that point. But yeah, I think that is obviously a lot what I was thinking when I wrote Hayes, and how obviously her creative spark is from killing people. She finds it very inspirational because it gets her going, it gets her kind of excited, and it gets her thinking, and it kind of is an outlet for her. And I think it's a way when she has to stop for the sake of their family and try and live in suburbia and live a normal life, that is what she misses. It's that part of herself that goes a bit wild, goes a bit crazy, that she can be herself, her true self, and she has to suppress it. And obviously we can't all relate to missing killing people, but we can all relate to the sacrifices and compromises we have to make when you become a parent, and when you're in a long-term partnership. There are all things you have to let go for the sake of your relationship, for the sake of your family, and it's tough. And I think that's what I was really trying to say, but with just much higher stakes and blood.
Yes, yes. Well, yeah, I mean, this is what I loved and resonated with your novel so much about is, I mean, on a metaphoric level, it works so well about how parenthood just overhauls everything you know about yourself, about your marriage, about your, artistic or whatever, fill in the blank, careers, livelihoods, endeavors. And then you have this amazing high concept that your two main characters are reformed serial killers or struggling. And I want you to kind of give the setup because it's so brilliant. And I feel like there must have been a light bulb moment for you when this kind of story came together in your mind. So can you tell us about that?
Sure. I mean, it was really just sparked by, I think parenthood is such a leveler, right? Because it doesn't matter who you are or what you do, or, how big you are, how small you are, whatever is going on in your life, you become a parent and you love your kid and you want what's best for them. And that suddenly becomes the focus of your life. And all those hours I spent killing time in playgrounds and soft play, I was looking around going, I was trying to imagine what it'd be like if you were like a hardened killer. And Hayes and Fox are good serial killers, I have to point out. They're kind of like a vigilante power couple. They only kill the bad guys who the police can't get. And I just suddenly thought, imagine being that kind of ferocious, that kind of violent, and then be sitting down trying to get your kid to eat a carrot. Like it just sparked something in me where I thought, I mean, because it doesn't matter what you do for a job. A kid doesn't care. You're just their parent, and it doesn't matter what amazing thing you've done at work that day or what terrible thing you've done at work that day. You're just their parent who's there to look after them and do everything for them, basically.
Yeah.
And I think that's really kind of the idea that I came up with when it came to the idea of having this couple who were reformed serial killers. It was just such a funny idea in my mind of how they would navigate parenthood and all the normal stuff that we have to deal with. I guess, and especially for Hayes, I just really love the idea of an extraordinary woman in an ordinary situation. It's like all the mundane stuff we have to go through. And I think that's what I really enjoyed writing in her, because she is a character who is so full of self-confidence and doesn't care what people think and is very sure of herself. And I think which was very liberating to write, because I think women were so much more apologetic and so much more trying to like not upset people and worrying about what other people think, and again with all the at the school gates and all that kind of stuff. And I think for her just steamroll in there, kind of eye rolling and going, well, this is me, and what am I doing here? How did I get here? Was just quite an entertaining thought.
Yeah. Well, that speaks to also, and we discuss this a lot, Liz and I, between ourselves, and then also on this podcast, the whole kind of unlikable character paradigm that you find in fiction a lot. And what I thought was so great about this is how you threaded the needle. As you said, Hazel, she's very self-assured. She's very unapologetic, super self-confident, speaks, sort of eschews social graces for unvarnished truth, which makes her somewhat unlikable to some of the characters around her, but makes her extremely likable to readers. So how did you kind of strike that balance from like a character development perspective?
Yeah, it was tricky. I wanted people to. I felt it was important people to be able to relate to her, and I think a lot of people have those feelings of slight isolation, feeling like the kind of outsider when it comes, like, because you're joining a new gang, right? You've become a parent. You're now suddenly meeting all these people, and the only thing you have in common is you've got a kid the same age, and it's all a bit like, especially with your first, you don't really know what you're doing. You don't really know what's right. And everyone's judging, and you feel like everyone's judging. Mm-hmm. And I think I wanted to get that across, that, give her a break. She's new at this and doesn't know what she's doing. But I'm hoping it comes across that she's kind of amusing enough that you kind of forgive her sins and her slightly scathing comments about other people, just because it makes you laugh. I think that was the idea anyway. You forgive a lot if it's amusing, I guess.
Yes. That's great. Well, I also just the idea of humor. And there is so much of it, in parenthood and in marriage, opportunity for it. One of the things you do so well is write these just like hilarious, acerbic one-liners throughout the book. And I just found myself laughing out loud a lot, both just because I really related to things and also just kind of how you positioned them within the story was so brilliant. And I wonder if that was conscious. I know a lot of it tonally has to do with who the characters Hayes and Fox are, but when you are writing, do you kind of have a sense that you want to imbue comedy into the more serious elements?
I think so. I kind of, yes, I always think it's nice to try and add a bit of humor. I do enjoy the one-liners. Sometimes I come up with a good one-liner and then I'll try and fit a scene around it, because I'm so happy with that one-liner. I'll be like, oh, she could say this. Now, what do I have to get her to be able to say that? That's just sometimes, how it's the chicken and the egg. Sometimes it doesn't go the way around you think. But yeah, I guess to me it was part of her journey is to be able to look at parenthood, and I guess like how we all look at anything in our life, where if you're trying to find the funny, it kind of makes things better. Like that whole thing of no matter how bad things get, if you can find a black joke kind of to make dark humor, you can kind of just it kind of makes it bearable. So no matter how bad things get, if you can find something to laugh about, or kind of it makes it feel somewhat easier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, speaking of that tonal balance that you mentioned, one of the things that I found really fascinating about the way you were able to strike that balance is, as we mentioned earlier, Hayes is a fine artist, and within the book you have certain reviews of her work along the way, and one of them, during a review, the reviewer describes her work as, quote, raw, exquisite takes on female rage, which I think also beautifully doubles as a description of the novel itself. Mm-hmm. So I was wondering what inspired you to kind of mirror and echo those themes within the novel and the larger story.
It's funny, actually. I think a big part of it was I sat down to write it, and I realized pretty much straight away I did not want to write female victims. I just, there was this big news story in the UK, and it really stuck with me. It was this awful story about a young woman was walking home from a friend's house, and she did all the right things. She chose the longer route on a brightly lit street. She rang her boyfriend on the way to say she was on the way back. She did all that, and she got stopped by a police officer, and he showed her his badge, and yeah,
Yeah.
Sarah Everett. It was a terrible story, and because he was a police officer, she went with him, and he murdered her, and it was just, it was something I think that really resonated with especially us Londoners, that it's something we all do so often, you know, in our early 20s, and all the way through our kind of our youth is you just, it's something that's ingrained in you to do the right thing, to try and avoid getting hurt, and to try and get home safe. And I think in that case we were also kind of wounded and angry from it, because it wasn't fair. She did what we'd always been taught to do, and because this bad man had a badge, she went with him, and it just kind of really was like a, it was horrible. And I think just off the back of that and every other news story I'd read in the last however long, I was like, you know what, I want to write a character who is so furious at the way things have gone. She's gonna be on a one woman mission to try and even the score, and be out there killing men only. They, you know, their rule is they don't kill women, and that was it. And yeah, that was where the female rage came out, was through her. If female rage had a knife, that would be Hayes. And I think it was just quite therapeutic, and I quite enjoyed that idea that she was this kind of, and you know, and Fox, her husband, being the ultimate ally, there with her, you know, clearing the CCTV and helping dispose of the body, and kind of that was it, really, I suppose.
Yeah.
They're the perfect match.
Yeah.
I definitely want to keep talking about A Serial Killer's Guide to Marriage, but I would love to kind of back up a little bit to when you were talking about, you know, it sounds like an early love for reading and writing, but, you know, no formal training, which neither do Greg and I have. And a lot of the guests who've come on, we talk about, you know, kind of the difference between self-taught and masters and all the different avenues to become published writers. And I'm just wondering, from your unique journey, do you feel any kind of imposter syndrome being now a multiple time published author?
Oh my God, all the time. I mean, honestly, it feels so kind of ingrained in writing that I don't understand anyone who doesn't have it. It's because at the end of the day, we're just sat at home with our laptop, tapping out some little stories that we made up in our heads. And it's like, sometimes I look at it and I'm like, oh my God, how is this my life? And then, so there are days where you kind of think, slightly despairing, oh, this is terrible, I'm terrible, what am I doing, this is ridiculous. And I mean, it's funny actually, because one of the questions people love asking is what book inspired you to be a writer, and what and what I always find really hilarious is, if I really think about it, I could mention lots of amazing books where I was like, wow, that was brilliant, that makes me want to write. But at the end of the day, the books I found the most inspiring were the really, really bad ones, because all it did for me was make me go, I mean, if that got published, maybe I've got a hope. And you know, and it was this whole like, I could do better than that, right? I better try then. And it actually kind of made it feel more accessible and more, you know, more of a reality that could happen for me, because I read some things where I was like, that is just, you know, so I'm very grateful to them for that, because otherwise I would have, you know what it's like though, even now you'll read a book and it's so amazing and so brilliantly done, and you're like, well, it's just, I can't compete with that. I should just give up. I mean, honestly. Whereas, so that's my whole, so my imposter syndrome goes quite deep, I'd say.
Yeah. I relate to every single thing you just said.
Cheers to the bad books that keeps us going.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. You also have a background in television and documentary as well.
Yes, yeah.
Do those, different forms of storytelling, did any of that carry over into kind of telling stories on the page at all?
No, not really. I'd say when I was working for Ewan and Charlie on their Long Way motorcycle documentaries, what I found really amazing about that as a learning experience is we were quite a young team they put together. They, with the two producers, they own the company, with the four of them kind of gathered together people they thought could put it on for them. And it was a lot of learning on the job, and it was amazing. They gave us real freedom to give it a go, and I thought that was the best learning experience, because you know, there'd be some days where I'd be organizing things I'd never done before. And they'd be like, well, you've got to do it. So just get on with it. And you're like, yeah, okay. And it was actually, and I found it really, inspiring, because I was like, yeah, I've now done something today I've never done before. And, it happened and it went off okay. And maybe that's just how you approach life. You just get on with what's thrown at you and do your best. And the thing that I found really hard switching though from kind of production to writing is how I was a bit of a spreadsheet queen. I still am. I do love a spreadsheet, and I loved the kind of logistics of it, and that you'd sit down and you'd be like, well, it's going to take me a couple of hours to plan this or apply for this or do that. And you'd get it done and that would be it. And what I hate about writing is, you know what it's like. You could sit at your desk for 8 hours and come out with 2 sentences you think are good. And then the next day it could take you 20 minutes and you've written 100 words you think are amazing. It's just that there is no real rhyme or reason to it, how some days are just better than others. And that's why, for me, who's obviously quite having to organize my time quite efficiently, I find it really tough, because I have no idea how long this chapter is going to take me to write. I have no idea how long it's going to take me to work out this plot point. It's either going to work or it's not. And I think that's something I really struggled with, because I miss the order of knowing, this will be the beginning, the middle, and the end, and then that job is done, and then I can move on to the next thing. It's just like, yeah, it'll take as long as it takes.
Is there anything you find it kind of freeing in a certain way when it is humming along nicely? Like the sort of being able to leave the more ordered part behind of your brain and just being able to flow?
Yes, no, I do. I really enjoy that. But I mean, you know what it's like when you're in the flow, it's the best feeling ever. And I do still use my spreadsheets just for timelines and things like that. But I suppose me going wild on a Word document is my freedom and my chance to kind of say whatever I want to say, and, just word vomit it all out and then edit it later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we love to hear about everyone's process. And it sounds to me like you might be a little bit of a mix. I mean, are you plotting, very carefully? Are you plotting a little bit and then riffing? Like, what does it look like when you sit down with a new idea?
I have a very rough outline, and then I just go with it. I kind of go by how the rhythm. Like if I've written a couple of chapters and I'm like, oh, now it's slowing a bit. I need to ramp it up. I need to chuck in something here, and then I'll come up with maybe another plot line that will fill that gap. Or yeah. So it's a very rough outline, and then I just try and write it and see what happens. And that's, yeah. I've never been. I find amazing people who can do those really detailed chapter breakdowns and just go through it bit by bit, and then just stick to it. I've never been able to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah. That gets me curious about something as well. Going back a little bit to the question of tone earlier, or the subject of tone earlier, essentially you've written like a serial killer satire, but what it's allowed you to do as well is it's kind of set the table for you to have this really sly dissection of, privilege, class, trauma, and all of these other kinds of themes. And so I wonder, as you're kind of talking about your writing process, did you go in knowing the themes that you wanted to explore, or did those sort of come to you, along the process of finding character and writing the story?
I think the themes were quite clear to me from the beginning. I knew what I wanted to explore, and I think that really helped structure it a bit, because that's what I wanted to say. And I think the feeling of I wanted to show how platonic love can be as important as romantic love, and the deep friendships, how important they are to who you are and how you live your life. And I think I hope that comes across, but that is something that was important to me, that it wasn't just about marriage. It was kind of for relationships beyond that. And, that whole idea of friends of the family you choose kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. That ends up being, sorry, I was just going to say more of a comment, like that ends up being a really satisfying emotional arc in the story, the friendship arc, which you don't necessarily in the early, maybe front half of the book, you don't necessarily anticipate going that way. So that becomes a really wonderful character arc for her. I love
Same,
that.
Great.
Yeah. You said it better than I was going to, Greg. And then also this kind of makes me think about one of the other, stylistic and plot things that you did so well was to really give us a very satisfying look into the past of your main characters, what kind of their origin stories, why they became who they became, and they're so kind of diametrically opposed. Can you talk a little bit about that and why that was important when you were building out these characters?
Well, it's funny because I did it more just to show, I suppose, because they're, Hayes is from a very non-privileged background, and then Fox is from a very privileged background. And I suppose what I was trying to show is, if you can say nurture v nature, they were at both extremes, and they've ended up the way they've ended up. So it's not saying one way or the other is what's going to turn you into a serial killer. It's part of who you are, and it doesn't matter what sparks it. I think if that side of you, or this kind of darkness is within you, it's going to get unlocked one way or another, regardless of how you've been brought up or how your childhood is or anything. And I think that's what I was trying to say by having them so extreme, at extreme opposite ends, that it's not like growing up with nothing is what's going to turn you into someone who doesn't care about human life. Just as growing up with everything isn't going to make you do that. It's just to say, look, these are two people who never quite felt they belonged with the people they grew up with, and they had it within them, this darkness, and it got unleashed at different times in their lives, and just they happened to meet each other.
Right.
Those character paradigms, how much of those did you kind of suss out going into the writing process, and how much did those emerge as you went? Because they're really wonderfully defined characters.
Oh, thank you. I very much like the idea of fire and ice, and I like the idea of her being hot-headed and act first, think later, and him being calm and measured and spreadsheety. So that was it really, and I think I just kind of lent into that side of them, and I think for Hayes to be the woman she is, where she's like, whatever, I don't care. She has to have that fiery side, because if a woman was, if she was calm and ordered, she'd overthink everything too much, that she wouldn't be able to be like that.
Yeah. What drew you to kind of write darker, like mysteries, thrillers, suspense? It always amazes us, the kind of widespread, nice, kind, open-hearted people who end up writing about, mayhem and murder. And you don't seem to be an exception to that. So.
No, I think I suppose it's because what I liked reading, and I also am always tired. And if I read something that's got a bit of darkness or murder or thriller in it, kind of, you race through it, right? It's more of a page turner for you. So I think that was more how I ended up here, I think, was to want to write something that could keep me awake and the reader awake.
Well, aside from all of those terrible books that motivated you to write, what were some of the books that kind of led you in that direction? Were there any particular titles, or was there like a phase of your reading life that kind of, pushed you?
I don't think, I mean, I've always read very widely, so I don't have a particular genre. Like I do read a lot of thrillers, I read a lot of romance, I read a lot of literary fiction. I suppose I've always been, I'm a fast reader, which is my one super skill I'm really proud of. So I think I've always enjoyed just going with what I'm in the mood for. And so I wouldn't say there was any particular books that, I think maybe just having an appetite for reading is what has helped inspire wanting to write, because I've just absorbed it all and gone, love this. Wish I could do it myself, kind of thing.
Well, I think that always I'm always interested in writers who have a sort of a broad palette, so to speak, in terms of genres and things like that, because I feel like it really, when you go back to the page yourself, it really offers you a pretty wide skill set to draw from, like sort of a broad palette to draw from. And you can tell that in your book. There's really beautiful prose in there, as well as all the kind of genre mechanic stuff that thrillers tend to be known for. So that really comes through. I mean, your reading seems to come through in your writing.
Yeah, but it is that classic thing though, isn't it? If you want to write, you've got to read. And it drives me slightly nuts though, because I get so sad with so much of my reading time is now writing time. And I feel like I don't read anywhere near as much as I used to since I became a writer, because it's hard fitting it all in. And so if I ever do have a a quiet moment and the kids are all happy, I'm straight onto my laptop rather than picking up a book. And
Yeah.
it's why, so the holidays where I get to read a few books, and the summers I normally try, I go away with like a whole suitcase of books, and I'm like, right, that's it. I am, it's a great time because the kids are old enough now. They kind of, I just need to keep one eye on them to make sure they're not killing each other. And I get to read. And that is the thing I would want to go back and tell me in the early days. Don't worry, one day you can sit down with a book and they will frolic in the garden and all will be well.
I aspire to those days. And
Yeah.
one of the things when I was reading, I mean, I had so much resonance with Hayes's character, and you, in the very early part of the book, you write a brilliant scene where she's there with Bibi, her daughter, at like a Montessori play space or in a class, and it's like I knew you had been in that experience. It was so pitch perfect and the details were dead on. But then, before we started recording and you said the age of your kids, you've been kind of out of that phase for a bit now. So I'm wondering, like, what was it like to return to that, kind of craziness of parenting a toddler? And
I mean, I have to say, I felt quite smug. I know that's not what you were. It's just because it's funny, actually, because I look back on photos of the kind of early years with the kids, and I'm like, why do I look so awful? Why is the house such a mess? Why are all the children naked? And then I remember, oh yeah, it was hell. It was like this kind of chaotic, ridiculous time. And I think I kind of lived it for, I think until my youngest was, I'd say 3 or 4. It was pretty tough. It was exhausting. And I think now, in terms of my productivity, I'm just so excited to have them all at school now, all out the house. And I try and stick my deadlines and working to term time, so I blitz it, and then I can be a bit more present in the holidays, although it never actually doesn't always work out like that. I've just been writing the sequel to Serial Killer, and just due to various timing issues, I had to work this, over the Christmas holidays, which was not good for any of us.
Had you originally mapped it out to be, a multiple installment story for this?
Well, I think you always start wanting to leave it open because the hope is that you'll get that deal. And so to have it is great. And I've nearly finished it. I'm handing it in very soon, so it's off my desk.
Well, that's huge news. I am so excited about that. I'm curious about, do you research a lot before you work on your books? I know your first book has a spy element, and obviously this book has a serial killer element. Do you spend a lot of time reading true crime, for example, and kind of getting into the...
No, I don't do that at all, because I'm actually terrible at reading gory stuff and actually watching it. I'm really bad. I think the way I try and get away with it in these books of combining these two worlds that don't feel like they should be combined is I kind of create this kind of world where it is a bit dark, but it's also okay, kind of thing. So a lot of it is I kind of make up my own rules, kind of thing. So I don't think the research would necessarily help in that regard, because I'm not trying to make it gritty and realistic. I'm more interested in making the characters and their story realistic than the whole setting of how killers kill, or how spies spy, really.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
I was curious about a structural element of the book that I wanted to ask you about. There's kind of an epistolary structure in some places where you alternate the chapters with, as I mentioned earlier, art reviews, and then also there's a text message thread and then news bulletins as well. What kind of led you to format it that way?
I don't really know. I think I wanted to kind of, I guess, maybe break it up a bit, or I wanted to give the reader a bit of insight into other sides of them outside of that, because it's all in first person. It's, her first person. And I thought it'd be quite interesting to see how the outside, how, for example, for me, the text messages to her friend was a way of showing how she was missing him, and how she was missing this friendship, and how it was how she the things she wanted to say but couldn't say, kind of thing. And for the art reviews, it was just an interesting way to describe her paintings that are inspired by her crimes, and to see how just to give some kind of color to her art, really, as to how what other people make of it, rather than her just describing it.
Right, having the narrative separation. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
One of the things I love about Hayes's kind of orientation to her killing is like the kind of feministic side, and picking victims, as you mentioned. Both Hayes and Fox only kill men, and it's very kind of vigilante Batman. I think of Dexter, justified, in my opinion. And I'm wondering, just kind of from your point of view as like the creator of this world and these characters, is their prism of like who's deserving and who's not? Is that trying to think of how to phrase this question. I guess, do they believe that everyone is either all good or all bad? I mean, how does that kind of spectrum work for them at different parts in their story?
I think it feels like it's quite instinctive, and it's either men they've caught in the act, or they've heard about, or I think that was my thinking, that they were it was definite. It wasn't just people who were suspected. They would have had to have get away, especially, it would have been people who'd got away with it, or people they'd come across because they'd gone out looking for trouble, kind of thing.
Right. I love that.
Yeah, that's such a great aspect of it. And it allows, again, I sort of said this before, but it allows for this framework where you can really examine a lot of kind of social, socio-political, socio-economic issues in this framework, where it sort of allows the kind of the honey to make the medicine go down a little bit easier. Yeah. And I always love that. I always love that kind of, like, I guess we'll call it like the kind of delivery system for these sorts of
exactly.
fiction. Yeah. Is that something, when you were kind of thinking about going into writing books, did you have some idea of that bubbling away in your head of sort of being able to do that, being subversive in that way?
I think it was just quite my natural voice, I think, for when it came to writing these characters. It just, because of the nature of what they were doing, as in they were doing, dangerous, deadly things, but also trying to have a family life. I think you kind of, it gave a bit of an avenue for humor naturally, because it is quite ridiculous, but it's just to lean into that and try and explain how it isn't that ridiculous, if you see what I mean. Like, because at the end of the day, there are bad people and they have kids, right? And it's just more like, you could be, again, it's that whole spectrum of how bad is bad. There is, would Hayes and Fox be bad, but they're actually doing good? They consider themselves, secret superheroes because they're ridding the world of evil people. But other people would be like, oh God, you clearly enjoy the violence. There's something not right about you. And I mean, you can say I can see both sides. It's just all subjective as to what degree they're good or bad, really. And I guess, I suppose for that it did make it, I always think humor is a good way to get a point across, because like you say, it's like, when you're trying to give a dog medicine, you hide it in a chunk of cheese, right? And it's like, it's that whole thing where you want people to take on what you're saying, but hopefully quite enjoy it, and not realize that you're not hammering them over the head with it. You're just giving them a bit of, humor while also making your point.
Right. A soft glove approach. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you find that you get a pretty healthy range of responses from readers in that regard?
No, it's been great, actually. We've had some really lovely reviews, and the audiobook has been brilliant, actually. It's we've got two narrators, one British, Fox is British, male narrator, and Hayes has got an English female narrator. So it's perfect, because it's really, for me, it was fascinating hearing them bring the characters properly to life. They're both actors with loads of experience, and I think they've done a brilliant job. And so that for me was because normally when you hear your words, I don't know why it always makes me just want to disappear under a duvet.
Mhm.
But they do such a good job. I'm like, I am more appreciating their great performance than listening to my words going.
I
But
really
yeah, I mean, I don't know about you, but I find it hard to not read reviews. I think, especially because I spend so long at my laptop writing and being a bit bored, and then you're like, oh, I wonder if anyone said anything, and then so you look it up, and it's the best feeling when you get a really lovely one. You're like, oh, that's totally made my day, and now I feel, you talk about the imposter syndrome. If you get a bad review, you're kind of like, oh, well, yeah, that's right. I'm terrible. I should know. What am I doing? I mean, it's what I expected, really. So when you get a good one, you're like, what? Me? Really? Oh, thank you.
well, that's a excellent segue into an area we love to talk about, and perfect for you because you're just right now like at the beginning of the rollout of your publication, and are you going to do events, and you're receiving reviews. So the, pause for the are you doing events question, and you can answer with the rest, which is what do you feel about promoting your work, the kind of writer versus the author dichotomy. Do you enjoy both, one more than the other, one not at all? Tell us where you fall on that spectrum.
It's funny actually because it's no one ever really tells you when you're trying to get published. You're just you all you care about is getting published, and you think it's just you sitting at your kitchen table tapping things out in your dressing gown, and you don't really think of the bigger picture. And what I found really interesting is as soon as your book, you've got that deal, that no one ever says to you, are you any good at publicity, or do you want to go off and do events? Do you want? It's just like this is happening, and you're like, oh, okay. And I guess it's something I don't naturally like events. I always find it really interesting meeting people who've read the book, and I don't love speaking in front of big audiences. I find it quite nerve-wracking, and so it kind of slightly kills my day because I'm a bit like, okay, well, I just got to get through this. I just got to get through this. But then a lot of the time, you do end up actually enjoying it. I think it's more just the anticipation of how it's going to go, and the fear of that rather than the actual event itself, which can be really lovely and actually a lot of fun. It's really nice because they're always at festivals or bookshops or where people are there because they love reading. It's like it's your people, right? They're people like you who just love reading and writing, and so it's a really nice community.
Hmm.
But sort of by extension of that, do you have a writer author community as well that you've kind of become, ingrained with?
Not really. I did on my kind of journey to get published, I did do a online writing course for 6 months, which was so helpful, mostly because I mean the tutor was amazing, but it was because we had to post 2,000 words every 2 weeks of the book we were working on. And I found that structure really helpful because it meant you had to keep doing it and not just write any 2,000 words. 2,000 words you were posting on a forum for 10 other people to tear apart. And
Right.
I found that structure so helpful for
Hmm.
getting me going and rushing through things.
Yeah.
But I'm very lucky. My best friend, who our mothers are best friends, we've grown up together, and she's also an author. And
Mm.
so we are each other's support group, and we just bounce back and forth. Yeah, but it's so nice because we just know what it's like. We'll sometimes just send a page and go, am I mental? Is this rubbish? And then they'll be like, well, maybe. And it's so nice because we just don't even. It's just so nice to have someone who you don't have to worry is gonna be a fluffer and kind of just give you a
Yeah.
oh wow, it's so great. You're like, I don't want that. I just want someone to tell me how good is it. Am I going to embarrass myself if I send it to my agent right now?
Right. No, and that is so essential to have at least one, if not more, friends and colleagues who will tell you it like it is. You need to hear
Exactly.
the
It's a really
truth.
precious asset, I have to
Yeah,
say.
absolutely. I just want to go back to what you were saying about the events. I really relate to you about being, the apprehension leading up. I always have so much anticipatory stress before the
Yeah.
events. And then usually takes me about 5 minutes into the actual event where I start to settle in and feel like much more comfortable and really enjoy myself. And, I have the added benefit of not having to do them alone. And Greg is there to kind of catch me.
Yeah, that's
But
great.
you said something really beautiful that I'm going to take with me. And I just think bears repeating that, like, when we go do these events or festivals or conventions, it's with other people who love to read and write. It's not like we have to go do these events in front of like a Teamster union for, you know,
Exactly.
for another industry altogether. It's like, it's a warm kind of space and crowd. So
Exactly.
thank you for saying that.
Oh, I'm
And
glad that's helpful, but that's what
yeah,
I say to myself whenever. But it's like, it's hard to not kind of spiral when you're panicking and think, oh, but then that's what I always came back to. It's like, yeah.
yeah, no, and it's a celebration, and also, I kind of love your response to like a positive review really booing you, whereas I kind of can be like, if I see one positive, but then like one negative, that will overpower the
Yeah,
positive
it's,
effect. So I have to tread lightly reading reviews. But I'm just wondering, going back to this online course you did, I love the accountability factor and the having to get 2,000 words up, but the idea of 10 people potentially tearing it apart, was that motivating for you? Was
oh
it
my God, it's horrible. It was also because I'd never shown my work, apart from my best friend, I hadn't shown my writing to anyone. And I kind of only applied for the course because I think I had about 20,000 words of this kind of novel in progress, which turned out to be my first book. And I just thought I'll apply for the course because they have to see something, they have to think that you've got some talent because otherwise it's wasting everyone's time because you're all assessing each other's work. And if you're a disaster, I guess they're going to also be spending all their time just ripping you apart and it's not fun for anyone. And I think I had it in my head where I was like, if I get a place on this course, I'm going to really go for it because it shows that I'm not total rubbish and they think I'm good enough to get on this course, therefore I can really try and make a go of it. And it was absolutely terrifying, especially as I was writing about a lactating assassin and everyone else was talking about it was all quite literary, I think. And I just remember sitting there going, oh my God, they must think I'm on drugs. It just felt so excruciating. But I was like, what they must think. But on the whole, I think I'd say at least half of them kind of got me, and it was great because it was really supportive then, and they and it was that first time when people start taking you seriously and you start to take yourself seriously, and you're like, oh, I am a writer because look, I'm doing a writing course and other people are reviewing my work. And but yeah, the first time I posted, I was it was terrifying.
I bet.
Well, leaning into the switching gears a bit and leaning into nice things that people have said about your book, um, I have to ask you about this because you got for, pardon me, for a Serial Killer's Guide to Marriage, you got one of the greatest blurbs I've ever read. And it is from none other than the wonderful actor Hugh Grant, who describes it thusly as, quote, an invaluable manual that I return to again and again, which is just in and of itself a phenomenal blurb. And I was just curious what the backstory was on how you guys were able to, kind of get
It
that.
was hilarious. No, I managed to slip him a copy. What can I say? No, it's great. I think he's got such a hilarious sense of humor
Yeah,
that a quote like that is just it could only really come from Hugh, right?
Yeah.
yeah. No, it's perfect. It's so hand in glove with like his sensibility and yours for this book.
Yeah,
Yeah,
His
yeah.
entire press tour for Heretic has just been
yeah,
so brilliant. I mean, and the
Yeah.
movie is brilliant, and the tone of
Oh,
it
he's
is,
amazing in it, isn't he? No,
oh,
it's incredible.
but
yeah.
every piece of press he's done, I think my favorite so far has been like the Vanity Fair did a whole series where he was like watching movies that he had been in and just roasting himself in like Notting Hill and
I think he should write a book. He's so naturally witty without I think it'd be effortless for him.
oh yeah, yes. Let's start that call for action here,
Yeah,
and we'll tag him in all
definitely.
the things.
For anyone listening to this, start hashtagging Hugh Grant
Hugh Grant.
novel and just let's get that out there in the world. I love that. Good.
Yeah.
Well, Asia, I just, one of the things that we love about having writers and creatives on is the hopes that people who are listening maybe have like a novel in progress or an idea that's kicking around in their head and are maybe feeling the kind of doubt that comes along with this spooky art, as it's been called. Do you have any, advice or, wisdom that's been useful to you to kind of keep you going or get you started that you want to share?
I think it comes back to that. I found it really helpful, that phrase, no plot, no problem. As
Mhm.
in, just write. Just don't, because I think if you sit down and go, right, I'm going to write a book, it sounds really intimidating and slightly just impossible. But if you start writing, and it doesn't have to be any coherent order, just a character you like the sound of, you know, they can, it's a scene you've pictured and people are doing things, just write that. But don't, or yeah, I think just find the voice of the character you like and write that, and then eventually you'll think of something for them to do.
Mm, that's great advice. And I just want to reiterate your novel is so good. Your characters are so well drawn and it is such a page turner. So everyone
Oh,
listening
thank you. It's so nice to hear.
needs to read it. And yeah, with that, Greg, did you have any parting words or questions?
Asia, thank you so much for, again, spending some time with us. This is
Oh, well,
really
thank you so much for having me. It's been a very nice end to my day with that time difference.
Oh,
very good. Very
that's
good.
right.
Yeah.
It's a little bit later there.
Yeah.
Where can
So
listeners find you on social media and out in the world?
I am on Instagram at asia.mackay.
Awesome.
all right.
Yeah.
Well, listeners, make sure that you pick up A Serial Killer's Guide to Marriage. If you're listening on release date of this episode, it is out tomorrow, but grab it whenever and wherever you can. It's fantastic. Asia, thank you again. And I'm just going to take us out. Imposter Hour with Liz and Greg is created and hosted by us, Elizabeth Keenan and Greg Wands. The show is produced and edited by Bookwild Collective founder Kate Herget. Scott Leeds composed our original theme music, and Steve Luoma designed our logo.